Hello, Hockey World. Today is Thursday, December 27th, 2018.
I'm Peter Testy in Winnipeg.
I'm Anthony Mingioni from Philadelphia.
I'm Russ Cohen from Sportsology.
And I'm Michael Agello, and this is the HockeyBuzzcast here on HockeyBuzz.com. We may be joined by Eklund a little later in the show. Started with the World Junior guys. I mean, I was, I think, ODing on the World Juniors yesterday. I watched every game that was on NHL Network, and the only complaint I'll have on that score was the post-game show on the U.S. game. I understand why they had to do that, but it was extremely lengthy, and I really wanted to watch Canada score another touchdown against Denmark. So let's start with the U.S. game first. The U.S. beats Slovakia, who they lost to last year, 2-1. It was 1-0 after 2 periods, and then there was an early third period rally. Russ, the thing I took from it is the commentators were saying that the U.S. were playing good, and my contention, and you and I were going back and forth on this. They can't be playing good if they're losing 1-0 to Slovakia. I mean, I'm not taking anything away from Slovakia, but the U.S. are a pretty loaded team, and they weren't winning that game going into the third. So, in my mind, them playing good and them losing 1-0 doesn't.
I mean, it was bad, then it was okay, and then it was a good third period. They played one good period. Right. That's what, and that's I tried to point that out this morning too in an interview. That's really what they did. There were a few things that I thought Mike Hastings didn't do that I noticed more than what he did. What he didn't do was early on play Jack Hughes enough. Like at this point, we should all know what Jack Hughes is. He should play as many minutes as the best guy on that team, but he wasn't. And to start the second period on the power play and not have Jack Hughes out there to start that was crazy. Like I just didn't even understand why you would do that, but they didn't do that. And at some point you realize, and this has always been my contention with Jack Hughes, you can't hold him off. And you'll be able to maybe bottleneck him for a period and a half, but he will figure you out. And the best thing that he does that I don't think any player can do like him is when he goes in on his natural side, he can cut across the grain either behind the goal or at the top where, the point is seamlessly to get to the other side, and no defenseman is a good enough skater to keep up with him or not get picked by an opposing player. And that's where he starts doing those passes, those drop passes, little backhand passes, and he just finds guys. But I was surprised that they went with the goalie they did. He's good. He is. I thought Primo had kind of earned the spot, but we're noticing that in game one, a lot of teams sort of are trying out everybody. So that was fine. End of the day, they don't have elite forwards. And that's what's going to really keep them from winning a gold medal is when you watch the other teams, they're going to have a good power play, the U.S. Their defense is good, but they don't roll 4 great lines. And that's the problem. They're good players. Like I could talk about all these players, and they're good, but there's very few great players on the team.
Anthony, I was saying yesterday that, you talk about the players that would have qualified for this tournament that were kept in the NHL, and 2 of the best were Middlestat and Brady Tkachuk. I mean, and you could see it yesterday. I think the U.S. are very talented. They're very deep, but Russ is right. They don't have that awe-inspiring talent to put them.
Yeah, those guys are elite level. Yeah.
But I think Hughes is great, but I don't think he can do it all on his own. And if Middlestat and Tkachuk were there, then they'd be really, really deep and really talented.
Now you're asking obviously Wahlstrom, and you're asking Farabee to take on roles that are probably about a slot higher than they probably would be under normal circumstances. Yeah. And they're going to be good players, no question, but they're not at this point of their development quite there yet. And if you had a guy like a Tkachuk, in that circumstance, that's a game-breaking talent that allows you to kind of break through. So the game isn't a nail-biter like it was yesterday, 2-1. And again, we know Slovakia has been a tough out.
Sure.
They're a tough team. They stick to their game plan, and they do a pretty good job of it. And they're just there to basically try to bleed out a win against you. So you could look at it from Team USA's perspective as a positive step of getting past an opponent that they've struggled with in the past. But at the same time, Russ is right in the terms of that, if once they get to elite level opponents, there's a good chance that they're going to struggle, and they are going to need to start relying even more on Hughes. I do wonder though, Russ, whether or not is it possible that they may be trying to conserve usage at least in that first game with Hughes, with the intention of really ramping things up as we go along?
Well, they played today.
So what I think Mike Hastings was doing was something that he does in college, and he was just playing bigger players more. Jason Robertson was getting a ton of time. Phil Kemp on defense. There was so much Phil Kemp, too much. I mean, I get that he's an okay player. I've seen him in tournament play, but he's not an elite defenseman, and he does grind it out. And I think Hastings falls in love with those kinds of players. When you hear like Brian Lawton in between periods saying, well, they have to have drive to the net. Yeah, you could have 2 or 3 good drives to the net in a game, but it's Quinn Hughes and Jack Hughes going around the perimeter, making great passes, dissecting the defense that's going to win it for you. They're not going to win it in the crease. And I think they were trying to win it in the crease and then realized, okay, you know what? Maybe that's not the best way. And I think they backed off it a bit. And Kyle Kaiser was really good. I just don't know if I would roll with him the whole tournament. I don't.
Peter, any thoughts on this game?
I didn't watch that game. I wasn't able to watch it, so I don't have a lot there. And
by the way, locally, people on Xfinity were having problems watching it, and I kept getting tweets about that, and I felt bad. It's like, I hope that gets cleared up for the next few games for people.
Well, okay,
fingers with that too. I mean, I have BIOS, so I was like,
yeah, me too.
I was worried it was a feed problem, but it recorded fine yesterday. So
yeah.
Well, as I was saying before, I missed the first half of the Canada game against Denmark. So Peter, I'm going to go to you first on that one. I caught most of the goals, and Maxime Comtois scores 4 goals. Morgan Frost has 3 goals and 2 assists. I'm sure Flyer fans are salivating at that performance. And I mean, it was
should be salivating out of anyone's performance on Canada in that game, because that was a debacle. And
explain that.
Well, look, you put up 2 touchdowns on a team in an opening round of the best junior tournament in the world.
Yeah.
There's a problem. And I saw something being tweeted out yesterday about this guy from Denmark who somehow got into someone's feed, and everyone's retweeting it saying they deserved it and stuff. And I'm glad people, writers for The Athletic and Sportsnet, all picked up one guy on Twitter from Denmark who happened to represent the entire country's feelings about that game. Bravo, guys. There's your journalistic integrity. Good grief, guys. And I even had to make a comment about that. But that's the kind of game that the IIHF has to make sure it doesn't happen anymore. It does no one.
But they never do,
good.
Peter. Like, you go back to the Olympics.
Denmark doesn't learn anything from that.
Right.
Getting your butt handed to you by 2 touchdowns.
Right.
There's no teachable moments in there.
No.
We said 8-goal mercy rule. What?
Exactly. But remember, even in the world.
When I was asked about it this morning, I hadn't had time to process it yet, Peter. And my thought was, yeah, you scored 14. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't slow it down that much, but I'm like, at that point, do you need to charge the net? Do you need? There's certain things you don't need to do. Clearly, when Comtois got hit with the stick from the Danish player, I was out of frustration. Like, it's like, And you know what? I get that everybody wants to wave their pom-poms in Canada because they got a lot of goals. Yeah. I'm going to come out and say, I don't think that game did anything for the team.
I don't think it helps the team. They would have been better winning 4-2 and having to struggle to maintain a 2-goal win.
Well, here's my bone of contention about the comments after the game. And Russ, Tim Hunter comes out after the game and says, Mikey DiPietro is my goaltender for the remainder of the tournament.
That's typical. It's just so
how can you decide that when you beat a team by how many saves did he make? 13. Ian Scott is playing today against, I think it's Switzerland they're playing.
Yeah.
Okay, what if he stands on his head?
He doesn't care. It's so typical, Mike. Look, it's funny because a lot of times we could peg these goaltenders. I felt like DiPietro was pegged and Hunter was just sort of playing along with the media, trying to act like there was a competition. In a way, I'm glad he took away the curtain and just said what I felt was going to happen all along, and now the ruse is done.
But it's asinine. It
doesn't mean he's the better goalie. I mean, all he's done is won a Memorial Cup, but but technically Ian Scott is the hotter hand, way hotter hand.
And in the exhibition turn, in the three games, he played better than DiPietro. But DiPietro was, he stood on his head against Denmark.
Great blocker save, Mike. You missed that.
Oh yeah, there you go. But okay, so we talked about Canada, we talked about the U.S.
I do want to say one thing, because even in the chat room, and I'm sure Anthony will echo this. Please don't call Morgan Frost a superstar. Right now at his level, he skates better than most, and he's got really great offensive instincts. He's got to jump a few levels. He's going to have to gain a little bit of muscle. Like, don't call him a superstar yet. That's the worst thing you could do to him.
I could look good playing in that game.
But I'm glad.
That's how bad the game was.
I know the players of the games are meaningless, but I'm glad that the IAHF, when they decided, or whoever decided to choose the player of the game, they didn't choose Comtois, who scored 4 goals in basically after it was 7-0
garbage time. You could say
garbage time, or instead of Frost, who scored 3 of the first 4 goals. Right. So those were, that gave them the big lead, and then they just went on from there. And the only thing I'll give Canada credit for is the fact, they played a great game. They should have dominated against Denmark. At least when it got to like 9-0, 10-0, there was no celebration. They just went to center ice and took the face off. They didn't want to rub it in too much. But when you're scoring goals like that, just skate around and just kill it. But goal differential means something in this tournament. I don't think teams like Kazakhstan and Denmark belong in it. But of course, I think that the tournament wants those extra games for a little extra money. And
it's the same thing. Like, you knew that Curly Joe shouldn't be in the Three Stooges, but yet somehow he was. That's what happens with this tournament. There's always a Curly Joe or a Shemp.
And I had to go down that road. Now, okay, the one thing I just have to depart from, and we'll talk about Sweden and Finland and the Czechs and Swiss in a sec. But and Mike Draco's who covers the Leafs and covers the NHL and was at the World Juniors last year in Buffalo. And I know Buffalo took a lot of hits for the attendance at some of the games. I criticized it, but you have to consider that somebody took a couple pictures of the crowd at the games in Victoria and Vancouver, and they weren't overwhelming. It was very sparse attendance in Buffalo for the preliminary rounds. People don't remember there was an outdoor game that had what, Russ, 40,000?
It was 40,000 paying customers, which is a lot. And he definitely tapped the economy for that game for the rest of the tournament.
Right. I mean, people understandably were going to save their money for the outdoor game rather than go to see Slovakia and Sweden.
But that was the Canadian spin, Mike. That's what that
was. So I mean, we'll see.
I really like the reporter. I get it, but you're right. He didn't take it all into account.
Right. So I mean, I think that's a factor. And okay, touching on quickly, the Czechs win in overtime against the Swiss 2-1. Really close game. Russ, you made some observations about Filip Zadina. He doesn't look like he's 100%.
No, I mean, he had an LBI, and the Griffins, I think, sat him for a game before the tournament. So I was kind of wondering the other day, hey, will he even play in the first game? But then, you made a great point. Like, no matter what, he's probably playing based on the needs of the team and him being there. And so he did. And I thought his skating was fine. I thought the issue was when he was planting for his one-timer or planting for his wrist shot, that it wasn't what I'd seen it and what I knew it to be. Now, just because the NHL Network play-by-play tells you that he hit a rocket off the crossbar doesn't mean that that's his best rocket. And I don't think it was. And I think that was an over-dramatization, to be fair. I thought he had some scoring chances, but he was really dynamic in the last World Juniors and should have been in this one. Now, maybe it's game one, but I do think the injury is something that he's going to be dealing with.
Yeah. But I think the Czechs were the more talented of the two teams. You saw them with Kaut and Zadina.
And we did talk about them. Yeah, they really have a good skating team. They have a little bit of size. They went with the other goalie. I wasn't in love. I still like Skarek better, but that's okay. Dostal had a good game. It still doesn't mean Dostal's the guy. Like, that's the weird thing. Like I said, in this tournament right now, other than Canada naming their goalie, I'm not sure any other team is really naming their number one other than other than Finland, and we'll get to that. But other than that, I think it's up for grabs for everybody.
Yeah, the other game, the late game, and I got till about 10 minutes left to go in the third period before I finally nodded off. And it was 2-0 when I fell asleep. So I think it ended. Did it end 2-0 or did
2-1? 2-1.
Okay. But I watched enough of it to get a few impressions, and I have to say that I saw some comment. I mean, don't get me wrong. Erik Brannstrom is a great prospect. He's an offensive talent. And I know a couple of Toronto-based reporters were talking about the fact, well, there were a lot of people who thought that Liljegren was better than Brannstrom, and now Brannstrom is proving that he's better than Liljegren. Sort of out of sight, out of mind. If Liljegren isn't there, how can you compare the two? Liljegren was the better of the two defensemen last year. But Sweden.
I could compare the two if you want me to, Mike, but I don't know if I think Brannstrom is a better offensive defenseman. He is.
No doubt. I think Liljegren is a better defensive defenseman, and I think they're equal as skaters. So I mean, it depends on.
I don't know about that. I think Brannstrom is slightly ahead of him now, skating wise. It's not a big gap, but I think the one play that Craig Button highlighted where he had the puck at the just before he scored the goal at the point. There was some pretty fancy skating there that I don't think Liljegren can do. But there's other things Liljegren can do that Brannstrom can't.
They're just different defensemen. And again, if Brannstrom knows that his style of play is going to be tilting towards the offensive end, I think there's a certain type of skating that you're going to be doing that can potentially put you ahead of somebody else who's going to be more defensive minded. And so to me right now, it's just different flavors of ice cream.
Yeah, no, I agree. I do think that's right. I will tell you this: the preview that I gave everybody, that they have the best blue line, they control the puck, they draw penalties, all of that happened. And I think every team, including Canada, is going to have problems with them, because if we haven't learned anything, the way hockey is now in the 21st century, it all revolves around your blue line and then your goaltending and then your forwards. Yeah, and Canada's loaded with forwards, but they're not loaded with top-flight defensemen. No. Sweden has 3 top-flight defensemen that can skate the lights out but also hold on to the puck. And we saw penalty after penalty. This is one of the first times I'd ever see Finland sort of break tradition and not be like totally disciplined in the game. Right. But I will say this, Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen played great. That was the great Pekka Luukkonen that I was talking about. If we see the other one, they're sunk. Like, they don't even have a chance in this tournament. He kept him in it.
And Peter, to Russ's point, I mean, you look at Sweden's power play, and they used Boquist and they used Brannstrom. They're probably the only team in this tournament that have enough offensive defensemen to put more than one defenseman on the power play. And then the second power play, they have Sandin, who's really good offensively as well. So and that gives them some flexibility in terms of their offense.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's why I think a lot of people have Sweden as a potential winner of the tournament, and if not in a top 3, because they're able to do a few things that the other groups can't, particularly Denmark. Not to pick on the Danes, but
you're going
but I'm going and I'm not even doing that for national pride. I just think it's just that whole game just rubbed me wrong, and I turned it off because it was like 7-0.
I don't blame you, Peter.
I got better things to do than watch touchdowns. But yeah, I mean, the Swedes are an interesting team. They're a diverse lineup and skill, and they're going to make things interesting. And we can only hope for some of the other games to sort of make up for a bit of lackluster from yesterday.
And, I didn't mention Fabian Zetterlund of the Devils. He had a hell of a game. They do have, I did mention Oscar Bach. Bach looked good. They do have some forwards, but none of them are tremendously offensive gifted, but the defense is. But, I was surprised that Samuel Ersson got the start, but Anthony and I had seen him in camp. I had talked about him pre-draft a little bit because I knew a little bit about him. Then I saw more in camp. Really liked him. He had a great game. I think what really sets him apart, and I think Ole Eriksson Ek is still a better goalie, but Ersson's got an exceptional glove hand, not just to be able to make that save in the top corner. Everybody can make that. He actually can reach out in traffic and make a save, and that's now becoming, to me, a big function of the goalie. Like the flashy goalie save, everybody's been making those since the 80s, but if you can make it in traffic when guys are right in front of you and the puck's up in the air, that's really big, and not everybody can do that.
It's you would call it pretty much glove discipline in this case. We saw it. We saw a little bit with Carter Hart early on this season in the AHL, where his glove hand is critical. It's not just for as you said, not just flashy saves, but where is he positioning his glove? How does he have a position, especially when traffic is getting in front of him?
Right.
That's what I saw last night out of Urson. Again, he had some great stops in the third period from what I saw. He got a little scrambly late, but I think everybody did because Finley was really pushing hard there. So there was a couple moments where he was kind of sliding a little bit out of position, but for the most part, that glove position still probably saved him a few times, and he made some big stops there. So Urson's definitely an interesting, as Russ and I have discussed, definitely an interesting prospect for Philadelphia.
And I did want to mention, when I was talking about the other day, Mike, the fast breakability of Capo Caco, you saw it. When he has the puck behind the net, if he feels like going up the ice and starting the rush, he will. And he'll make something out of nothing. And he did a couple times in that game and really can get that offense started. His problem is, I did see late in the game, because he's young, he did try and go through 2 or 3 Swedes because he was just like, man, I got to do this myself.
Right. He tried to take him on his shoulders.
Yeah, and he's not quite there yet.
Yeah, but you know what? It's good marks for him to try.
Yeah.
I have to say one thing. I'm sure Sabres fans are salivating at Logan, and I mean, the save that he made on that wraparound, it was a Gumby save. It was
a leg save.
Oh my God! Oh my goodness! I mean, and if you look at him in terms of the Sabres, how they're constructed right now, it would be perfect. He probably needs another, finish the year in junior, probably one and a half years or 2 years in the AHL. They've got Hutton, they've got Allmark. It work if everything works right. He's probably their goaltender in 2021 or 2022. So, I mean, he's, he was a second round pick. So that's what they're really expecting of him. Now let's move on, because there'll be a lot of World Junior talk.
Yeah, there's plenty to come.
Yeah. We'll be talking about it every day until the final. The Winter Classic. I know the matchup is not great. I mean, Russ, you're going. It's at Notre Dame. I think that's attention worthy. And, I'm concerned about this in one respect, and I bring it up every year. Has it jumped the shark? Because, and I know the matchup is not great because the Blackhawks are not good this year. They're one of the worst teams in the league. And, then the matchup of them and Boston loses its luster. But I'm starting to get concerned of it's Chicago. It's Detroit. It's Boston. It's Philly. It's the Northeastern, the big city. It's, I think that there are teams out there now, they wouldn't be as pleasing for TV, but Colorado or Minnesota or like some of these other teams, get them involved, because I think it's getting stale with the same New York, Boston, Northeastern corridor teams.
This is NBC though. This is NBC basically saying these are our big markets. These are the teams that we want on for the feature, and they're not concerned about other teams coming in. To them, they see Minnesota Wild and the guys on in New York, they're eye rolls probably in this case. They're just not seeing them, and that's a pure money decision. Completely agree, Mike. I'd love to see these other teams in there, but this is a pure network decision to me.
It is. I mean, I know you always want to rail against it, Mike. And I know I always have to say, in that area, it will be massive, and it will be.
Sure.
It'll be an attraction. There will be so many things going on. I do think the outside area is going on for 3 or 4 days.
Yeah.
I think it's even extended for what it usually is. But I get what you're saying about the teams. But the funny thing is, and I'm not going to say NBC's got it wrong, because for the stars that they're showing, there's still something to show. And it does seem like every Winter Classic, some big star is coming back from an injury, and now you got Zdeno Chara. So with the road to the Winter Classic leading up to it, which I do think they're doing a good job of, I've watched one already.
Sure. You
know what? They already have some drama, and I have to say, they still make money, Mike. They'll stop it when they don't make money.
And we can fold both of the subject into the same thing, Peter. I mean, first of all, like I said, I think it's getting stale. But if the NHL wants to keep it because they make money on it, and because it's a signature event, and because they use it for like their advertisers or whatever, like the All-Star Game, full marks, fine, go ahead. That's fine. It's not for me, but it's for other people, and that's fine. But you know what? Now the All-Star, there was some announcements today of the All-Star captains: Austin Matthews, Alex Ovechkin, Connor McDavid. Who was it? It was Shifley was the other one for the Central.
I believe so. I didn't even see the notes when I
right.
just
So
on Twitter about that.
If you're going to have a signature event like the Winter Classic, then get rid of the All-Star game, because the All-Star game, other than the announcements and other than the skills competition, is dreadful and meaningless. And I don't care. I don't care about this thing about the kids.
So you know what? This is how much attention I paid to the Winter Classic. I know Chicago's in it. It's Boston.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's on.
They're not trying to reach you, Peter. That's
no. Hang on. Yeah. And it's on January 1st, right?
Yeah, correct.
Okay. So where's it being played?
Notre Dame.
So they put it in Notre Dame. Okay. So here's the thing. Mike, I think you got a good point. Keep them separate, or make the Winter Classic game part of the All-Star game. Make that the game, and then have the skills competition with guys who aren't in it as your fun stuff, but do it in a city that can do both. So
I thought at one point they would do that. It's clear that they're not going to do it, but
there's some logistics there. But I mean, the All-Star game, the 3-on-3, the basic fact, and the Pro Bowl is like this too.
Johnny Manziel. Yeah. Show me the money. That's what it is.
Show me the money. Yeah. The Pro Bowl is like this too. The for whatever reason, the NBA is actually awesome. And in Major League Baseball, there is a sort of there's a point to it because it helps decide who has home field advantage, right?
Well, not anymore. Not anymore.
Okay.
The NBA is awesome because it is the exact game, because they never play defense anymore, so they don't have to worry about it.
Right. All they do is fire up 3-pointers all day.
But their players come out to this. It's a spectacle. I think if I were the NHL, if I were Gary Bettman, I would take your marketing team and I would go and watch what the NBA does leading up to their All-Star game, what they have around in the city and the events going on, and figure out what that is. Because it doesn't just draw the players who are playing. It draws their friends. It draws their teammates. They bring people in. It's all cute and everything when Blake Wheeler brings his kid on the bench and everything at stuff. But, nice, feel good story, but whatever. I want to see the players are having fun. I want to hear, know that they're out and about in town having a blast. And I want the game to actually be something of interest. And it's just not interest. There's just nothing interesting about it.
Okay.
And they've got a problem.
But two things. So like in the chat room, Esmir's like, well, why don't they have a lottery for the Winter Classic for the teams? Well, if you got Florida and Arizona, then what are you going to do? That would be horrible for a Winter Classic. So that's why they're not going to do that. The other thing, Peter, is people always forget that the NHL All-Star Game is a front for all the other business that's going on behind the scenes.
It's to reward the sponsors.
Together, every agent's there.
Yeah.
All the teams are there, and they have meetings that never see the public eye, and a lot of things get talked about and settled at the All-Star Game in a light-hearted atmosphere that doesn't get shown on NBC.
But how about Nashville, Colorado? How about, there's two successful teams having good years, two venues.
Colorado had one in their park, in their area. So and that was a stadium series. I think Nashville could get one. I do. I guess they would probably have it at the football stadium there, whatever they call where they play. And that would be fine. I mean,
how about one of the best teams in the league in Tampa Bay? You had a game in Los Angeles. You had a game in 60-degree temperatures.
It was awful. Let's be real about it. It was awful. That game, even trying to watch that game was awful because with the palm trees and everything else, it just didn't feel like hockey at all.
Give you a side note as soon as you're done, Russ. The NHL will never have it in Tennessee. I'll tell you the reason why.
Okay.
The name of the stadium is Nissan Stadium. It was the NHL's main spot, one of the main automobile spots.
Well,
interesting enough.
I don't know what else is out there. Clemson, is Clemson out there? I don't even know.
Well, here's the thing. The NHL actually, when they did the Heritage Classic in Winnipeg, they actually changed the name of the stadium.
They did that in Toronto. The BMO Field was changed to Centennial.
And they might do that.
Yeah. And they come in and they literally take everything
like
over.
Sports, they don't have the sports, but they don't have the name of the stadium. It'll be like Titans Stadium.
No, I was at the Heritage Classic, Peter, but again, like I think they did it for that game just because at that time that was an old tired stadium. It was, and I think they were just trying to create excitement, but they clearly did it for the others to hide, the other brand name. But I forget what was the name of what the CFL stadium was then, Peter?
Well, it's IGF. It's still the same stadium. It's
no.
What
was the name of it then? It wasn't IGF then.
I can't remember. I tell you,
I can't either. But it was an old tired stadium, and it was small. And
no, the stadium opened in 2013.
No, but for this kind of event, it was woefully.
It's a smaller one. It holds. Well, they had 40,000 people in there.
Yeah, for the fans, it was actually okay, except the weather was so cold that, again, I tell people, snot was freezing on people's mustaches. Beards were freezing, that people were poking holes in them.
Russ, it wasn't that cold. I was there. It was above zero one day. It
was freezing cold for the second game.
Russ
I'm looking it up.
Russ can attest.
The ice was brittle.
Russ can attest to this because we were both at the Centennial. We were both at the Centennial Classic in Toronto at BMO Field, and we ended up watching the game and covering it from the downstairs media area because the press box upstairs was a plastic tarp.
Yeah,
you couldn't see. It wasn't transparent. It was translucent.
Right.
You couldn't see the stadium because the wind was coming in. Yeah. So you had a plastic tarp. No Wi-Fi outlet, no internet, and we had to watch it down there. So I mean, it's a great spectacle if you're in the crowd. I don't know if it's a great spectacle.
And at that stadium, their press box was so small because the CFL press box isn't that big that anybody who could fit was underneath. And then like Shane Malloy and I actually watched it mostly from the outside in ski pants and ski jackets, and it was freezing, and we took the
Russ,
stadium.
I'm looking at it right now. It was totally warm. I remember this. It was October 23rd, 2016. It was 10.1 degrees Celsius.
When the game started, Peter, not for the second game.
Yeah.
That's the second game. 50.2 degrees Fahrenheit.
No, that's wrong.
It's on Wikipedia right now.
It's wrong because
right.
I was watching things freezing. Go look at the account of the ice. It was brittle. Ice doesn't get brittle in 50
degrees. Are you going to believe me or you can believe your lion eyes?
I'm telling you, Russ, you think you got it confused.
No, I do not. I had the sheet. I could go get the sheet from my room, but I'm telling you the temperature was much colder than that.
Well, okay, here's the
I'm looking it up on the Weather Network now.
They weren't there. This is before the NHL had to deal with them. Go ahead.
You might see my video of snow in Buffalo on the Weather Network. There are only 2 outdoor games this year. This one coming up on January 1st,
right?
And the one at the Link.
That's how it's been going lately, though, Mike. If you think about it.
Now, tell me if this is smart. 2 days before the trade deadline, they're doing the outdoor game of Pittsburgh, Philadelphia. Mm-hmm. A little earlier in the season, maybe. I don't know. I mean,
it was Commonwealth Stadium. That's where it was.
Yeah, I think they did it with the understanding that at the time that they had some scheduling concerns, the Eagles and everything, especially after they had after the Super Bowl run last year, the potential for another deep run at the time. Now that kind of goes out the window, but it was more of a case. I think they were trying to. The NHL wanted it there. It was just a case of they wanted to make sure that they were safe with the date, and February 29th was definitely safe with the date.
I'm sure it was at the utmost concern of the IIHF when the Bills made the playoffs last year. They were worried about a Bills playoff game that they hadn't had in 18 years, but that almost created a problem. Okay, couple key injuries that we have found out about in the last couple days. And we'll take a couple questions from the chat before the end of the show. Matt Dumba, a serious injury for the Minnesota Wild. I mean, he was having a really good year, and I believe it's a shoulder injury. But the
shoulder injury.
Yeah, 3 months he's out. So, I mean, the only good thing is that, based on what time it is right now, he would be coming back if everything goes right just before the playoffs. But we know, if it's a massive shoulder injury, he's not going to be the same player coming back. So, I mean, this is a big loss for the Wild.
There's no way around it. I mean, it is, but they do have the blue line and the goaltending to survive it.
Yeah.
I'm still high on them because I think now they'll just get a lower seed, and I still think they could be a team that does damage. It doesn't seem like he's out for the year.
No.
So I think there's a chance that Dumba will play again in these playoffs, and it's going to be okay.
You may not. You're maybe looking at it with an injury like this. You may be just looking at a diminished Matt Dumba, where he's going to have to play, but it won't be quite to the level that he has been at already. He has been at this season.
Well, Peter, that this is a team in the Jets division, a team that they faced in the first round last year. Yeah. They still have Suter, they still have Spurgeon, they still have Brodin. So their defense is I think can handle it. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I'm not as enthusiastic about their playoff chances as Russ is. I picked them to make the playoffs, but not to really go far. But I mean, they're a good team. I just don't know whether this injury is really seriously debilitating or not. I mean, I think it is, but what do you think?
Well, what is debilitating is the team's just not playing very well. Right. And Dumba is sort of the straw that stirs the drink there. And sure, they've got Suter and they've still got a talented team, but Dumba is something that's sort of extra special in there that he doesn't get a lot of press, like some of the other defensemen that came out of that draft. But he is a very solid player, and he means a lot to the Wild. And I think it's confounding Bruce Boudreau right now, who's got some other challenges too. This just sort of puts a little more pressure on him. If I'm not mistaken, I think the Wild are 3-7-1, 3-6-1. I don't have it up right now.
Something like that.
I'll pull it up.
They haven't been playing very well, and they've got a couple losses to Calgary recently. It's something's the magic they had last year with some things isn't quite there with them, and losing Dumba is going to hurt. Well, of course it's going to hurt, but it's had an effect on them in other ways. And so, yeah, like right now they are, I mean, they're 2 points out of a playoff spot, and they're 3-6-1 in their last 10 with a 2-1 loss to Dallas. Dallas isn't a very good team. And Minnesota should be beating them in theory based on where they are, the talent they have, and they're not. And I think if something doesn't change, because remember they changed GMs last year in Minnesota, and Boudreau is not the GM's coach. There could be some. I think he finishes out the season, but this is definitely a place to watch. If Minnesota doesn't make the playoffs, he's a coach to watch, based on the fact that he could just be the fall guy, because that's the way it's going to work in the hierarchy.
You were right. 3-6-1 in the last 10 games. They're right now 37 points. They're 2 points out of a wild card with Edmonton in the second wild card spot in the division. They're 7 points behind Colorado, so they're probably shooting for a wild card right now. That's not the worst thing in the world. By the way, it was Nathan McKinnon and not Scheifele as the captain. The All-Star
and captain. I do want to say the weather was minus 1.46 degrees Fahrenheit at puck drop.
Jesus. Maybe with wind chill. I'm looking at it right now. And what time was puck drop?
That's everything. That made everything freeze. And it made the ice too cold.
It's only -1. Russ, it was the one we were all there. I wasn't even
Peter, I was there too. And I spoke to the guys on the ice, and I watched, and I was right next to the fans because I was very high up. Trust me, things were frozen.
What time was puck drop? 1 p.m.?
No, that was for the Legends game.
What time? 3 p.m. It was 50 degrees then.
Yeah. But at the time, no, it was 3 p.m. was not the puck. It was later than that, I think, for the big game.
The temperature went up 50 degrees. It was
50 degrees Fahrenheit at 4 p.m. and it started dropping.
The sun was out.
Yeah, the sun was out.
I could show you the article. It was minus 1.46 degrees Fahrenheit.
I looked it up on 2 different websites.
But they're wrong. I'm telling you. They're aggregating information that's wrong. I got it from another website too.
I don't believe it. These are the same people who calculate the analytics for okay, so the other injury that was brought up in our pre-show chatter was Craig Anderson. And this is the first I had heard of it, and then I looked up, and it says he has a concussion. And obviously, the Senators right now are, we know the direction they're going. They may keep one of Duchesne or Stone, but I think they're going to trade one of them. I think that if everything is clear in terms of his health, I think they would trade Anderson. But concussions are an ongoing problem, and he has faced the most shots in the NHL this year. So, I mean, the busyness of his year so far, and now the health of him. I mean, I thought that he was Anthony. I thought he was a guy that would have been a target for the Flyers, because I don't think it would have cost them a first-round pick, because I think Ottawa would be interested in taking that salary off their books for next year. But that's all the Flyers need, is another injured goaltender.
No, exactly. I mean, certainly with a concussion, I mean, that's a little bit more of an, it becomes, for lack of a better word, a little more of a nebulous thing in that circumstance. That doesn't mean that they're out on him. It just means that it may delay them from, they were in conversations at all with Ottawa, which I don't have any knowledge of, that takes him out for just a little bit, maybe past the new year, and then they can get back into conversations. Because again, goaltending wise, they have to pick up somebody at this point. I know everybody wants Carter Hart to stay up. I just feel like it's going to be better for his development as he goes forward to continue his development in Lehigh and then comes back. But for now, I'd expect for at least until the next several games, they'll remain with that particular goaltending pairing until then. But unless again we hear an announcement later today, they have another deal on the shoot, which is
well, that was what I was going to ask, because you were on the show yesterday, and I brought this up because Eck brought it up a couple weeks ago about Jonathan Quick. Nick Kiprios from Sportsnet reported the rumors of Quick, and my assertion is that Quick is not a stopgap to get to Carter Hart. I think he's an impediment. If they trade for him, he's got 4 more years left in his contract. I think he's obviously a Stanley Cup winning and a great goaltender, but he's not a guy that Carter Hart is going to take over from. I agree with what Russ said a while back. He says Jonathan Quick is going to fight tooth and nail to never give up the starting job.
But at the same time, you get a couple more years down the pike in terms of potentially, he's not as good as he was or more diminished in his play. Right. That might change the conversation. He also could potentially be a candidate. I don't know what is in terms of Seattle, possible. Sure. Again, if you're going into that draft, you're just like Vegas did. I would think the pattern is they like to have at least a veteran goaltender to start their inaugural campaign. So that's why I'm not. The more I thought about it, the more I'm not completely dismissing the idea of Jonathan Quick out of hand. So that's, but at the moment, I don't think it likely. I just won't dismiss it entirely.
Yes, we have a battle going in the chat.
Again, I'm going to leave it alone because I know what I know. But when the players are wearing extra underwear and talking about frigid ice, there's a reason. But anyhow, getting to this, there's probably a reason Jonas Korpisalo is starting at MSG tonight. And that may be because there is discussions between Columbus and the Flyers. Because there's no good reason to have Korpisalo starting a game after the break.
They're playing back.
MSG. Why wouldn't you come
back to back?
They're playing back to back. They're playing Toronto tomorrow.
Okay. Yeah, all right. So I guess there is a reason. Here's what I would do. Honestly, if I were the Flyers and Chuck Fletcher, I would abandon the goalie hunt. If I can't get Bob and I can't get, or if I can get Quick, but it costs too much, I would just stop because I don't think the market's good. I don't think the timing's good. You have an arsenal of young goalies that I think you're better off waiting on. And even though it might be the will of management to go and do this, I would turn around to say there isn't any deal that's worth it. That's what I would do.
I would go a further step, and I would send Hart back down to the American Hockey League and call up.
Well, eventually I would do that too.
Here's the issue, Mike. I hear you on that, but again, if Alex Lyon was playing better when he came, obviously coming off the injury that he had, if he was playing better, I think it would have been a slam dunk that Lyon would be up here. The fact of the matter is, I'm not 100% on the fact that they would trust him being back up here right now until he gets a better head of steam in Lehigh Valley. If he's playing really well and Hart is struggling starts struggling a bit, then I could easily see them swapping the two goaltenders. But until then, Lyon needs to get on a good head of steam here before I would bring him up.
A couple other notes, and then we'll take a
wait. The biggest note. Peter was talking about Winnipeg. He wasn't.
That's the one I was at. That's the whole point. And then
the first Heritage Classic is what we were talking about.
You're talking about Edmonton.
I didn't know that. I was talking about
when I said the Legends game. There was no Legends game in Winnipeg.
Yeah, there was
a Legend. Well, yeah, I guess there was.
Yeah, the Oilers versus
with Gretzky and Messier. Yeah, okay, that's fine.
Jesus, they're arguing about something.
Yeah, Edmonton was colder than balls. It was minus 23 at face-off. It was awful. Yes, Russ, it was terrible.
I remember
Theodore had to wear a toque on his head and everything.
I remember Messier and Gretzky looked like they were out, like they were like Nanook of the North or something. Yeah. They were like in an igloo.
It wasn't just bad for them as it was for the real players.
Just a couple notes here about teams that are getting players back. Russ, you mentioned Chara. Bergeron came back just before the break, and I'll tell you something. It probably couldn't have worked any better for Boston. They get their two key players back. They have 44 points right now. They're 3 points behind Buffalo. Boston's finishing in third place at the absolute worst, and they have the cap space to add before the deadline. So they lost two of their best players, and they didn't slip. And in the West, Nashville's getting Arvidsson and Subban back off the injured list. They're only 4 points behind the Jets. I mean, Peter, that's going to be a battle going on until the end of the year. I mean, we're only 35, 36 games in, but that's a battle for home ice advantage and for, a couple other things. So,
yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I just put up my game preview between Calgary and Edmonton or Winnipeg tonight. And, those teams have such similar things too. And we're sort of discounting what Nashville's getting back. And Nashville is a very good team. And, you look at those three teams and what Colorado's doing. It's going to be, the Central is just every year you think, when's it going to take a break? And it doesn't. It's just when is someone in the Central just going to have a reprieve from having to go through punishment? Right. It doesn't happen.
But it's different teams. I mean, 2 years ago, it was Chicago and St. Louis, and now it's recycled. But again, this is an argument, and I will make this until I'm blue in the face, of changing the playoffs, the structure back to the 1-8, because instead of the interdivisional, because the fan is losing out here if it's Nashville, like say it finishes right now. I mean, the season finishes right now. Nashville, Colorado, those are teams I want to see deeper in the playoffs. And we're going to see that in the first round. Buffalo, Toronto, or Boston, Toronto. Those are, I want to see those quality matchups deeper in the playoffs. And by having the structure the way it is, you're eliminating, half the good teams in the first round of the playoffs. And that sucks. I hate that.
I'll tell you what, Peter, and you're a better judge of this, but the way Nashville is, I think the trading deadline is probably everything to Winnipeg's season this year, unless you're going to just add Vesalainen and hope that that's your ad. It's going to be, they're going to have to really be creative to make their team better or better than Nashville at this point.
Do you think that they'll do what they did last year, Peter, and load up and trade a prospect or trade a first round pick for another Paul Stastny, or do you think they'll stay with what they got?
I think oh man, this is such a tough one to think about right now. I think Chevy will try and do something. I think if anything, he's going to want to try and find some left defense help. I think that's the other thing. And maybe a guy who can add a little more grit, not be as stupid as Brendan Lemieux.
Yeah, I mean, like
I don't think he's going to mess with what it is right now. But definitely left D help, because if Morrissey goes down, it's a bit of a dog's breakfast. And again, you don't want to throw Sami Niku into that pressure cooker. Yes, he came in last year and did it fine, but you need some experience, and Joe Morrow isn't going to cut it.
I'm convinced, and maybe I'll be proven wrong by before or after February 25th. I am convinced that this year, the Leafs, get ready to drink, Russ, will get that top four right-handed defenseman that they desperately need. I think they're also going to do what you were talking about, Peter, I wrote something yesterday about, cheap depth forward veteran guy at additions like a Troy Brower or Kyle Clifford, somebody of that nature, somebody who can play third or fourth line, who can, still play, has some playoff experience, but they are so bereft of anybody with a little pushback that they really need one or two guys.
They have Tom Sestito, Mike. All they have to do is offer.
He's on a PTO. Shut up. He's on a PTO. Tom Sestito. Anyway, let's take some questions.
Hold on.
Tom Sestito. He can't even play for the Marlies. He's sitting in the press box at Coca-Cola Coliseum.
Yeah, see, don't get the name.
I think the biggest thing when you look at who's going to acquire is who's going to decide to sell. That's the biggest thing, right?
Right. That's the hardest part.
Yeah, and right now,
remember, Stastny was a kind of Stastny acquisition by Winnipeg came out of left field because no one believed St. Louis was going to be a seller.
It was a reluctant sell. It was.
And it was after Vegas had done that crazy deal with Pittsburgh to keep, who was it? Brassard?
Yes.
Brassard from going to Winnipeg, who they were actually targeting.
Right. And they had to dump Ryan Reeves' contract on Vegas to make that work.
I mean, I'm a fan of Derek Brassard, but I have to tell you, he's one of the more overrated players in this era. And he has all of the things that you want. He skates well. He's got a good shot and everything else. But when you count on Derek Brassard, most of the time you're not getting the point.
He's underwhelmed in Pittsburgh, to my estimation. But right now,
he's injured for the start. But yeah, you're
right. But right now, it's like Jersey, Ottawa, Philadelphia, maybe Carolina, definitely Detroit. I think those are sellers in the East. And right now, LA, Chicago, St. Louis. And if Arizona had anything to sell, they would sell. But I think
I don't know if Jersey has anything to sell, but I will say this. Jersey is going with Mackenzie Blackwood again tonight. And I know he's got 3 games in and a .930 save percentage. He is 22. He's got a fair amount of AHL experience.
Kincaid got hurt, Russ. He got hurt against Toronto.
But that's just how much they don't want to play Corey Schneider. That's this point, this is what the elephant in the room is. And again, this has been an abysmal year for them. The ship is sinking over there, and it's a lot to expect from Blackwood. I think the season's over for him anyhow. Let's see what the questions are. All right.
Okay. Yeah, 0-15-3 for Schneider in his last 18 games. I mean, it's amazing.
Right, so Adam Ziller, it's not a question, but he says Morgan Riley prefers regular bacon over Canadian bacon. Canadian bacon is a fake thing, right? Okay. Anyhow.
Well, Pimeo bacon. I prefer Pimeo bacon over American bacon.
Because you're a communist.
I just love Pimeo bacon. It's great.
But a real question from Adam is, what can the Sabres do to solidify a playoff spot, a top 6 forward or a D-man? It would be a D-man because they have enough offense right now. And I think even if Skinner goes a little cold, I think they can get by because I think Middlestat will start picking it up at some point. But defensively is where, because look, in a playoff series, you can play Zach Bogosian 10 minutes and get away with it. You can't play him for 20.
You stole my thunder. I says I would be a D-man because I'm expecting Zach Bogosian to be on the injured list in the next week or two, like he normally is. But I mean, the one thing you have to factor in with the Berglund departure is that they're thin up the middle. I mean, they have Middlestat and they have Eichel. After that, I mean, they're just not. I don't think. I think that if they could add themselves a veteran that doesn't cost them a ton, that probably would be something that would help them and address. I think they can make the wild card.
Maybe the Sabres will just go down the MSG path and get Adam McQuaid. Anyhow, if he's healthy, let's see. Esmir wants to know, the Blues are sellers, but do you think they're willing to trade Parayko to let's say, Toronto? I think they would be more in the offseason because T.O. isn't trading Nylander right now. No, they're not trading Nylander right now. I do think Parayko's the guy to get traded. I don't think they would wait on Toronto. I think they're going to trade him now so they could sign
Pietrangelo.
Pietrangelo in the offseason.
I do find it interesting that only in like the last week or so, because everybody just dismissed any kind of Nylander trade talk after the signing. Well, no, Kyle Dubas promised that he wouldn't trade him.
Yeah.
Doesn't have any no trade protection.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's because Nylander started slow, because I think anybody in their right mind would have expected him to start slow. But everybody realizes they've got Janssen they have to sign, they've got Kapanen they have to sign on top of Matthews and Marner. So I just don't think there is room there to keep Nylander, and he can get the most value back. So it just, to me, it adds up that they will trade him, but nothing is for certain.
Yeah,
but I'm just saying
they trade him in the offseason, though. They're not trading him during the season. And
no. Why, if you're paying $10 million in cap space, why not use them?
Right. Parayko's going to get shopped. It's just a matter of who has the assets to get him.
Right.
One of the people in the chat room said, "Hey, Gergensons can play 3C." No, he can't. That's beyond his capability at this point.
He has played it. He's not good at it.
No.
I mean,
playoffs it would be abysmal.
And I'm a Gergensons fan. I think he's been he was definitely misused.
Oh, he was rushed and misused and all of it.
He was rushed by Ted Nolan. He was misused by the next coach, by Bilesma. Bilesma did not like him.
Yeah.
And now they're sort of searching around for a role for him. And I think he's been better under Housley, but I don't think he's a center. I think he's a winger.
So I'm also being asked, can Minnesota trade for help on defense? I don't know if they have the pieces. I think they have the pieces.
They're deep. They're prospect. They have good prospects.
Yeah, I'm not worried about them on defense. Now, Charlie Coyle could still be dangled, but I think he would be dangled for more offense. I think they would be looking to load up with another offensive player, another fast player. I think that's something you could see them possibly doing. I mean, if there was a compliment that they could get for like Zach Parise so they can get more lines going, they might do something like that.
The question is, if Minnesota continues to fall, Peter, do they shop Eric Staal?
That's what I'm thinking.
I mean, if they were out of it, they would, but they would have to be really completely out of it.
Because the way he's scoring right now, that's a first and a top prospect. I mean, that's a guy. He can play wing. He can play center. He's a veteran. He's won a Stanley Cup. I mean, that's
you were a top 4 defenseman.
What's that?
And and the thing about that is,
if only he were a top 4 defenseman.
That's true.
Yeah. The other guy they could consider moving too, I mean, he's serviceable, is Eric Fehr too. Because he's a UFA. You could get, someone may be interested in it.
It's a mid-round pick. I mean, the Leafs buried him in the American Hockey League, not even with their own minor league team. They buried him in San Diego, and then they traded him at the deadline. And he played pretty, I think, from what I saw, he played okay for San Jose in their playoff run. So, he's not.
It's interesting to think, like, if they plummet, you got to think they try and get something for Eric Staal. And Buffalo would be a team that should pony up Eric Staal.
Yeah.
I mean, that would be great for them if he's actually available, but I don't think it's going to get to that.
But again, there's a lot of things that have to go on in Minnesota right now for this to drop. But you know what? If you go back a year ago and look at the standings, who's top of the Central? St. Louis. And they missed the playoffs.
Just a little note here from Renaud Lavoie, TDA Sports. Carey Price is not going to accompany the team to Florida. I think they're probably doing the usual Tampa Bay Panthers back-to-back, like the most. Right. And this is after the break, so
he's got mileage on him, and this is the way to sort of save him from going to have to even sit on the bench. Like, this is where it's at for him.
Yeah. One more question, Russ.
All right. This may be the best question in the chat room.
Okay.
Foxtrot, this is from Lord Oberman. Foxtrot or selling England by the pound? To me, it's selling England by the pound, because I Know What I Like is just so good that I don't think there's anything on Foxtrot as good as it, in my opinion.
Supper's Ready.
Yeah, I like I Know What I Like better than I like Supper's Ready.
Yes, I mean, I Know What I Like is a single. I mean, it's a great song. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I don't hate any song in either one of the albums, although God, what's the long song? I'm drawing a blank on A Battle of Epping Forest.
Okay.
The lyrics are just are sort of dreadful. Even Peter Gabriel is sort of ashamed of it. I watched, but no, honestly, I would say Foxtrot.
Okay.
I love them both, but I would say Foxtrot.
It's a really tough decision.
And Cinema Show and Dancing in the Moonlit Night are two of their best songs.
They're great. I mean, they're great. Unfortunately, Cinema Show always got thrown into a medley situation over the years.
Yes, of course. they always did that.
I know, but it is great. I mean,
but I love Can Utility and the Coastliners and Get 'Em Out by Friday and Sepper's Ready is an epic. So okay,
yeah.
Okay, now you got me all psyched. Let's do a progressive rock show.
We need to. It's up to Eck.
Let's talk some King Crimson, who have been besmirched and ignored for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame once again.
I know,
which is crazy.
In favor of Stevie, and don't get me wrong, I love Fleetwood Mac and I love Stevie Nicks. I saw her in concert. And backlighting with a white dress on in 1981. It was a religious experience for a 14-year-old boy. Yeah. But I'll tell you right now, she's a great singer. I love her, but there are many performers as individual artists like Gabriel, like Steve Winwood, like Phil Collins that deserve to be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame as an individual before Stevie Nicks.
Yeah.
Yeah. The thing about King Crimson is there was no commercial success there, right? No. And unfortunately, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is about that. I saw King Crimson when Bruford went back to him in the 80s at a place called Stony Brook University on Long Island, and it was great. And, Fripp is a weirdo, but he's really good.
Here's the thing about here's the thing. You got to remember is after they do the awards, they have a big jam ceremony where they play music of the people there. Who the heck's going to be able to play King Crimson music?
Right.
Tony Levin will play bass.
Tony Levin will be there. Yeah,
but I mean, you've got to have people who can keep up with them.
Oh yeah. Oh sure. Yeah. But see, the thing is, we have seen bands like Love and Spoonful who are more influential, and that's the reason why they're in rather than the success. If you look at King Crimson, their influence was on guys like Bowie, on guys on Yes, because there was interchangeable members. On Genesis, trivia question or a little bit of trivia. The first Mellotron that Genesis had, Tony Banks bought from King Crimson.
Oh, you're kidding? I didn't know that.
Yeah, so it's like
I think even Carl Palmer was influenced by Bruford, and Bruford's only retired. He's not injured like Neil Peart or Phil Collins. He could come out of retirement and play, Peter. So I don't think it's that much.
No, I just meant like you have all the other guests in their giant jam at the end, and
you're right. I mean,
that's the thing. Like they're so musically beyond so many other guys that it's like.
Unfortunately, like a couple other bass players like John Wetton and Boz Burrow are no longer with us, but Tony Levin can cover. But anyway, we'll do a separate show on that because I think we could go on for 2 hours on that one. We'll be back tomorrow with another edition of the Hockey Buzzcast. For Peter Tessier, for the departed Anthony Mingioni, for Russ Cohen, I'm Michael Agello. Thank you for watching, and remember, without the buzz, it's just hockey.